But do you have a legal
Women's
right
spaces.
to a single gender bathroom? I'm not sure I completely understand this term, this term of rights.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't.
You don't understand the mother being concerned about her 6-year-old. You really don't understand rights?
No, I'm following you here. I'm following you here.
this.
I mean, the reason I don't care about this is because I just don't know that these situations you're describing are happening. Well, there's a contradiction because it's
when the
female
audience
versus male.
watches it, they're going to say, this guy is creating all these mental gymnastics and overcomplicating something that is so simple, and this is so frustrating for so many people. If I identify as a woman, should I be able to compete in women's sports?
I feel like this issue is not something I terribly care about. I think that, I mean, let me be clear. I think these...
Should I be able to?
Trans people
or
are
not?
people,
Yeah.
and that they should have the same dignity that everybody else has. But I think that that's a question. I think that's a social question, but it's also a question of whether or not the government should be involved or not.
So should I be able to play?
I think that's up to the sports league. I think the sports league should figure it out.
There was this big topic with the Olympics. Should I be able to compete if I'm in the boxing in the Olympics?
I think that's up to the Olympics. I think that those people are probably the best in the world to assess whether or not.
Should I be able to use the locker room at the gym?
Again, I think it's up to the policies of the sports league. I mean,
but who's making? But there's no sports league making that decision. This is a legal decision. That's the problem here.
How so?
Because it comes down to the rights of the women in that space, and saying, okay, so if I decide tomorrow that I'm female, I'm legally getting all access to all the legal. I'm getting all legal access as a woman.
But do you have a legal right
spaces.
to a single gender bathroom? Does anybody?
If a man goes into a female's restroom, I would say that would be illegal. Police could get involved, could they not?
Well, what would you be arrested for?
Public
I guess?
bathroom.
Yeah, I guess what would you be arrested
airport.
for?
Sexually exposing myself to a female?
Can you use? I mean, I feel like a person.
So
can,
you think it's? I'm just trying to understand.
No, totally.
Is it
I think
okay
a
for
man
that?
can use any bathroom without exposing himself to others, even if it's a public bathroom.
Okay, so I'm just trying to
So
understand.
it's a very there's a line somewhere, but
So if I identify as a woman, I should be able to have access to that locker room.
I think that you should obey the law, for sure.
So it is about laws. It's not about a sports league.
Well, there's a conflation here between access and taking action in the bathroom. And if I'm a person who fully clothed goes into a stall.
That's what a changing room is for. It's for changing your clothes. I'm going, by essence of the purpose of the changing room, I'm going to have to take off my clothes, put on new clothes.
Right, but is it a requirement that you do this, that you don't take some propriety into account and do it behind a stall?
If you go
or
into a locker room and there's no dividers, it's a locker room. Do you see how this could? Do you understand why it's about a policy applied to this? You can't go. Well, this locker room needs dividers. We can't go space by space and defend one space for it and say, can't you do this behind a divider? Can't you go into a stall here? That's why it's about, like, do I get legal access or do I not?
That's interesting. Do I get legal access?
Should they get legal access?
I think that is a question of whether or not. Well, first of all, I mean, the reason I don't care about this is because I just don't know that these situations you're describing are happening in any kind of mass.
See, that's the response I often get is like, why should I care about this? I don't think it's an issue. Why would you have no right to care about this? But a mother in that changing room with a 6-year-old, if I walk into that changing room, you're saying that she doesn't have the right to make that decision whether her 6-year-old sees me or not. I don't care about it. I don't care. But
Well,
that 6-year-old,
I'm not sure it's about
is
rights.
it right for that 6-year-old that mother doesn't have a right to make that decision for her 6-year-old? That is a right. And if you say, well, why do we need to care about this? You're saying she doesn't have that right.
Well, hold on a second.
Care.
How is it a right if anybody at any point, anywhere, can do something lewd I mean, like this doesn't necessarily happen in a bathroom. I mean, this can happen anywhere in the world.
I often get that response. So it's like,
Well, so then
look,
what's
because
the-
you can go outside and expose yourself, therefore that mother has no right to say, wait a minute, my 6-year-old's standing right here. You're a guy with a beard claiming to be a woman. I don't want my 6-year-old to see a penis. You're saying, look, I could go outside and take my penis out at any point in time. Therefore, you have no right to be concerned. Do you follow the logic here? Is that really the case you want to make?
Well, no, I guess the reason I pose that the risk is there is because if I think what you're saying is, is that a risk that we want to exaggerate or make more available in a place where people do the very thing you don't want to happen, right? You don't want that exposure in a place where in the locker room, people are exposed.
People with penises changing in front of
correct
women.
Correct.
Do they have the right, does a person with a penis have the right to say, I identify as a female and I'm going to go in there and I have the right to that space? Let's keep it as simple as that, because that's as simple as it is. We could overcomplicate this to dodge the question, but we're not that silly. Let's contend with the logic.
Well, with the logic, I'm not sure I completely understand this term, this term of rights.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't.
You don't understand the mother being concerned about her 6-year-old.
No. I understand the concern, but I'm not talking about the
right
concern.
To make a decision whether her 6-year-old is exposed to a penis or not. That's a right. That's why we have laws. That's why you are not allowed to go outside and pull your pants down on a playground. Do you understand that? It's not that complicated. You really don't understand rights?
No, I'm following you here. I'm following you here. I have the right, and the right is granted by the forcible removal of that person from that situation, like the aggressor from that situation.
I mean, I tend to think that these are inalienable rights that are granted to us within this country, that we're, the idea of where do rights.
So, so this is something that's interesting, because imagine that you had a person who didn't want their child to be exposed to any genitalia, male or female.
But that's you're overcomplicating.
No, I don't think I am, because what we're talking about is the right to not have a male genitalia in a female bathroom. But what if I'm a person who wants the right to not see female genitalia in a female bathroom?
Look,
isn't that a right as well, or it's not a right?
You have the right to not have a female come in and sexually assault you or expose herself in. You have that right. You also have the right to, if you are concerned about changing in front of men, you're probably not going to go into the male's changing room. You might do it at home or whatnot, but you still have the right, if you would like to change in the male's changing room, to change in the male's changing room and not have a woman see you do so. You can understand that.
What I'm saying is that you in a gendered bathroom, if I see a male's genitalia as a male,
if that really bothers you, then there's other alternatives. You could not use the urinal. You could go into we could overcomplicate this, but
it's not an overcomplication if what we're talking about is where something on a playground is inappropriate, but in a locker room it is appropriate. Now we're saying that because the gender is different, it's inappropriate.
You can understand why, though, right? Surely.
Oh yeah, I understand why people.
Do they have the right to say?
Well, but this is the question. This is the question: is do they have the right? Because you don't have a right to say in a male locker room a male's genitalia is inappropriate. You don't have the right to do that. If I were to call the police on a male
definition,
genitalia,
that's the purpose of the changing rooms, for you to go in there and
that's
change.
Right. It is the purpose of the changing room.
Only men.
Right, but the expectation is that you have rights granted by law, and if a person is if a person is exposed but also being very lewd, I think that would violate the law, right?
Surely, yeah.
Right,
you
of course.
Like sexually assault another male.
Even just from a visual perspective.
But we're talking about changing.
Correct. If a person, so then the difference is the expectation of this room is to be single gendered, and now there's a contradiction here. Does that give you the right?
I don't understand.
Well, there's a contradiction because it's
when
female
the audience
versus male.
watches that, they're going to say, this guy is creating all these mental gymnastics and overcomplicating something that is so simple, and this is so frustrating for so many people, because people are acting like they cannot understand when the mother says, no, you can't do that in here in front of my 6-year-old. I have a right to make that decision. That doesn't make me transphobic.
But you're not making the decision for you, you're making it for another.
As a mother is allowed to do.
No, not for your child. You're making it for the for the person who's there that you don't want there. That's
No, your mother making. The audience is going to say, "What are you talking? You're making this over." The mother is saying, "I'm making the decision for my. I don't want my child to see a penis today."
right. But you're then telling another person they have to take action different than what they want.
Correct.
Right. But that's where this becomes a question of rights, because whose rights are more important? The person who is the mother, or the person who is of a different gender or representative?
Right. Exactly. And so when we introduced exactly, this is why it's not just about the sports league. It's actually about, at the beginning of this conversation, actually is about laws. Because if
I think you're right. You've convinced me.
Okay.
You're right. It is about laws.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if I decide tomorrow that I identify as a woman, the legal implications of that are going to determine my rights, right? So do I have the right to go into that restaurant? Because that now affects the rights of everyone who has access to that space already, women.
Well, I think it depends on how you behave.
So that's why there are many women. No, it's not about, it's about legal. We just identified this is actually about laws.
Well, no. It's not. It is about law.
All the women who have, it's going to impact women, which is why there are so many women saying that this is.
Well, if it impacts women.
We can clearly identify how that will have legal implications. It will have implications on women using that space.
Well, hold on. If I'm a male in a male locker room and I see male genitalia, appropriate. If that person is doing something, I think we can all imagine, inappropriate, then it becomes an issue. If a person who is transgender enters any bathroom, they're not causing a problem until they do. Right? They're not causing a problem until that exposure takes place.
The problem occurs if the mother, we're trying to make this as simple as possible. The mother doesn't want her daughter in this hypothetical to see a penis.
Sure.
You're not behaving necessarily, but the question is, does she have that right? You're not like doing anything crazy.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
You're a woman.
So let me ask you this.
You're trying to change your clothes, but you have a penis. Do they have a right to not be okay with that?
If you're
it's as simple as that.
Well, first of all, whether a person is upset or not can influence the law, can change the law, but the determination of the law is supposed to be objective, right? It's supposed to be justice.
It should be, yes, which is why it's not about hypotheticals of are there stalls? Why does she feel that way? She shouldn't feel that way because you're exposed to other people with male genitalia in the male's restroom. You're absolutely right in that point.
But the issue isn't whether or not they enter the room. It's not whether they enter the locker room or not. That's not the issue.
How so?
Because if
where is the issue?
The issue is when they're exposed to something inappropriate. That's the issue.
Okay, let's take this because it's not true. Because they have to take off their clothes. And they might not want a bearded person who identifies as a woman watching them do so. That bearded person doesn't even need to take off his clothes. Does she have a right to not get naked in front of a dude with a beard who identifies as a woman?
I would say that she has control of that right. She has the ability whether or not she does that. Like you said, if a person doesn't like what they're experiencing in a space, they have the freedom to leave. Everybody's personal issues don't necessarily reflect rights.
The wider implications of that, though? So now, if you're in an airport and you go into a restroom, that person with the beard who identifies as a woman might be in the stall next to you. Your only response to that is to say, that shouldn't bother you, but it might bother them. And
No. I didn't say it shouldn't bother them. I think they have every right to be bothered.
Can you acknowledge how this does have legal implications of access to the room? I just gave you an example.
You gave me an example of a person who enters a room, doesn't like what they find there, and then
so you're saying
can choose to leave or not.
You should just have to go to another restroom. That woman is in the wrong, not the guy with the beard.
I'm saying that we all get to have the personal freedom to choose how we want to navigate the world. And the things that you choose to care about are up to you.
Okay,
I've left rooms before.
There's no way to have conversations about laws if we can't take a hypothetical and examine that hypothetical and you just say,
well, we just
go to a different room. You're saying that the woman doesn't have the legal right then.
Okay, if I enter a room and someone is, like clearing their throat really aggressively, and I don't want to hear that.
It's a false comparable. It's absolutely false comparable and you know it.
Why?
Clearing your throat is not comparable to being exposed to genitalia. Can you acknowledge that?
I think that it is. It's definitely different, but
dude, you're gonna lose the audience the second. Really, come on, you're a smart guy. You can see how a 6-year-old. I don't want my 6-year-old to be exposed or have to be viewed changing their clothes, and you're gonna say that's.
Well, there's a lot of conflations that are happening here.
Throat.
There's a lot of conflations here. If a person is it has to be. You can't just talk about how it's simple. It's clearly a complex issue if we're talking about it for this long. And the complexity occurs by making sure you're specific with your definitions. When is this a problem? It's a problem when...
We don't get to determine that. That's the whole point of the law. It's blanket policy. You don't get to enter that room because I can't decide when it's a problem. That's why we have laws. You either have access to that, you either get the rights as a guy with a beard or identifies as a woman, or you don't. And I'm saying you don't, because we cannot decide. It doesn't go case by case when it bothers someone or not. That's not how laws work.
You're right. I think the question is, at what point are we infringing on somebody else's right by not having a conversation about what's reasonable?
And
I think that's really the question. Is what is a reasonable thing?
When what is important to you overrides what is important to someone else. So you decide you're a woman. Okay, the moment I try and accommodate that, but now it infringes on that 6-year-old, or it infringes on that woman. We now have a clearly identifiable line being crossed. We can say, wait a minute, we cannot implement this legally because it is infringing. That's an objective measurement.
Well, I don't think it's objective. I don't think it's objective. Because a person who is upset about that, there are plenty of people who are not upset about it.
But again, we can't go whether or not you're upset. Just because someone's not upset by it doesn't mean that this person doesn't have the right to be upset about it.
No, but now there's a conflation between the right to be upset and a legal ramification, and that's the difference.
It's not about, it's do you have access legally or not to that room? It's not about are you upset by it or not, because it might not upset me, but I can acknowledge how it could upset other people. That's how these laws work. It's not about are you upset or not.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If we redefined what female means to be inclusive of trans people, meaning that the expectation of this room may include people who look like men but identify as women. That space across America now has that expectation. Under those circumstances, wouldn't people then have the right to determine whether or not, because really that's what we're talking about here, right?
That's the argument being made, and my response is that would take away the mother's right to make that decision whether her daughter is exposed to that or not. It takes away the woman's right to take off her clothes without the presence of a biological male. So no, we can't do it.
But if she simply chooses not to use those spaces, her rights are intact.
But you're going back to the beginning of this conversation and saying she's in the wrong. She has the right to not have.
No. I'm not saying she's in the wrong.
Does a woman have the right to access a women's changing room without a biological male in it? That's the essential question here. And your response to this is to say she doesn't need to have access to that room. She should just do it at home.
No, my response is, how do we be inclusive and also preserve rights? She has the right for an expectation of a space.
And you can't do both. You can't do both.
I disagree. She has the right to an expectation of a certain space. If that space it has the expectation that there may be a biological male there.
I know that's the argument that the left would make on this. And I would say,
what's wrong with it?
Because you're telling the woman that you by definition of what you just said to me. Woman, we've redefined this to where you have to have the expectation that a biological male has access to the space. Wait a minute, you're telling me I have to adjust my expectation to change in front of a biological male? You don't see the problem here.
Well, it's not that they have to change in front of somebody. It's whether or not they want to use that space with that risk, if that's something that they consider a risk.
Do you see why that woman might say to you, you're crazy and this is infringing on my rights, this is wrong, this is morally wrong?
Well, first of all, the right that you have to use a changing room is defined by the law. And if the law says the expectation is that that you could have all manner of people in here, then your rights aren't being infringed. The definition of the room is changed, but you're not losing your right.
Which by definition changes the right of the woman to not do that in front of a biological male.
No, because nobody is forcing her to go there. No one is forcing her to change. These are choices she's making.
So you're saying you no longer have access to this room without the expectation of doing so in front of a biological male.
Well, if we're talking about rights and laws, and if that's the way the law is written, then correct.
So you're at a headway here. You understand? And I know that if you're
no. I'm saying this is a law. If it's a legal, like, first of all, there's a couple of definitions of like what a woman is. There's like the legal one, which I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. The social, and then the biological. Everybody's pretty much in agreement on the biological, but the social is the one people have the most issue with. And then now we've branched into this legal idea where we're talking about expectations of spaces.
You'll never be able to apply the social one to the legal one. Because
I don't doubt it.
We've clearly identified why.
Oh,
And the
100%.
best that you can do, that you can propose, and it's totally understandable because that is the only proposal you can do, is to say you need to adjust your expectation of what you're going to see in that room, what your 6-year-old is going to see, and what you can manage to do in comfort, and to who you're going to change in front of. And you're just going to have to adjust your expectation around this new social definition. That's the only solution you're going to be able to offer. And you need to tell that your argument is that those people just need to get over it or don't use that space. But if you can't recognize how that's not viable. I know you do disagree with it, but we have a lot of women who are speaking out on this issue.